Hello, good evening. It is my good morning. Let me just type the theme in. This month's theme. Q&A theme is female-led relationships. So, today we're talking about female-led relationships. Thank you everybody who submitted your questions. I'm going to be answering them shortly. Let's see. And if you have any of your own, you're welcome to add them into the chat and I'll get to them after every other lovely thing that's coming my way. So how do I pin a comment? Does anybody know how to do that? Pin. There we go. So first I'm gonna go live on my pleasemelive.com. Let's turn that on here. Let's do everybody today, shall we? How is everybody today? Okay. So this month's Q&A, I do them every month, and this month's Q&A is female-led relationships. And let's start getting to the questions. Actually, let me start by saying that female-led relationships, it can be between people who both identify as female. It can be with between people, one that may identify as female and one that does not. It's, to me, about embracing a leadership role when you do identify as female. And that can look very different between relationship to relationship, and the intensity and the configuration can always be different, in my opinion. So let's get to your very good questions. First, let's get to one by Mistress Odette, shall we? So Mistress Odette says, how do you handle the exhaustion of full control or fostering autonomy of the sub? I guess if it's exhausting, then maybe it's not necessarily the intensity that suits your particular dynamic, and maybe it's about considering a different intensity. For me personally, it really depends on the personality and the dynamic that you have, right? Somebody might think that permission to go to the bathroom is an everyday occurrence or an easy thing for you to administer. However, somebody else might think, I don't want to have to tell you when you're allowed to go to the bathroom, in which case that needs to be something that maybe is negotiated or spoken about, or to the levels of what you want to invest or not. Does it get tiring? Sometimes even I don't want to make that a final decision. And in those cases, I say, you make the decision. Just make it. And that kind of clears me of that moment, if that is helpful at all. But I guess if you're going to use the word exhaustion, that probably, says that maybe it needs to be a different dynamic, be something that's less intense for you, and you need to understand a little bit more maybe about what you want out of that that's going to be fulfilling and sustainable for you. Yeah, so I hope that gave something. Thank you so much, Mr. Odette, for the work that you do, and for that question. Thank you. I really appreciate you chiming in. And then another question. Does FLR, there was a lot of questions about chastity and orgasms. So does FLR solely depend on the woman taking control over the man's orgasms? If that's what it means to you, then good for you. But for me personally, and for what I see in the community, it is not. There's a lot more to it, often. And even when the control over an orgasm is something inherent to the relationship, even then, often it is used as something much bigger. So it's not just, no you can, no you can't, but it's, no, you can't focus. I need you to focus on this relationship, on this task, however, and it's about maybe refocusing that energy. Often, I find. So I don't think that it's so necessarily centered around sexuality as much as it might feel like it is for some people. And of course, it might be so. However, it isn't always necessarily so. There's many other facets to it. So let's do another question. These were great questions. Thank you so much for them. Let's see. Shall we just go through all the chastity questions? Do you prefer to have a husband locked in chastity 24/7 in an FLR? So this would be very dependent on the different individuals that I'm having these female-led relationships with. I am actually as strict as I can be around protocol and ideas of the way that I like things. I am also very adaptable to the person and the dynamic that is in front of me. And with some of my relationships, they are always kept in chastity, and in some, they're not at all. And some of them, it's about a mental communication. Some of them, they have free reign. So it really, really depends. Is it my preference? It's my preference when it benefits the relationship. When I can see that it's going to make a difference to their focus, which is an important thing for me, and their perception of self. I feel like it can be very distracting to how somebody reflects on who they are and how they are in the world. And so I limit them maybe more than somebody who I feel can move through the world in a way that is easy for me to get along with. So that's kind of how I play with chastity and how I utilize it as well. Let's see. Do you intend to go into this kind of relationship with your future hubby? How do you know I have a future hubby? The thing is, I'm open. You know, I'm always open to the way that life goes and the people that I may meet and how that may trigger different needs and different configurations in me. That is always something that I'm very open to. However, saying that, the only way that I have experienced relationships so far where I am the woman in that relationship, then I've tended to be the one that leads the relationship, even naturally before I understood that this was a definition, that this was a possibility. And the people that I'm currently with, this is the relationship type that I have with them in very different intensities and very different configurations, but in general, my awareness of the relationship is often a bit more developed than the people who I'm in the relationship with, and so I naturally take that role. If I were to find somebody who was able to step ahead of me, then it would be an interesting experience to see. But I have yet to find that when I am the female leading the relationship. Yeah. Okay. Does a female-led relationship also implicate that it is 24/7 in your opinion? In my opinion. Yeah, so I guess that's the thing, right? So with some of my relationships, it's actually, I go through quite a stage of acclimatizing. Oh, pleasemelive.com has just dropped off. Let me log back in. But yeah, so I go through different stages of acclimatizing people to my definition of what a female-led relationship is. And which means that it's a process of ongoing negotiation. Is it 24/7? I guess in a sense it's 24/7 because my personality is somewhat formed and that demands a certain dynamic. However, I think different people would have different approaches, of course, right? But this is my opinion. Am I always on? As much as my personality allows. Do I ever not want to take the lead or not want to have an overview of the scenario, which is how I see what a female led relationship is? No, because that's inherent to my personality. Yeah. So in my case, I am always integrating that focus just naturally into the way that I interact with the people who I'm with. However, other people may see it differently. Yeah. Let's see. My hubby, he says he doesn't enjoy cooking, etc. It's up to him to say no to my requests. Correct. Yes. Well, everything is a negotiation, isn't it? Or in best case. um, Unless it's negotiated that there is no more negotiation after a certain point, which also does happen. But in the case that, say, you haven't negotiated that scenario where no more negotiation is on the table, then yeah, it's a conversation. And I think in those scenarios where somebody says they really don't want to go somewhere, it's like, all right, that's fine. If it's a short relationship, then that's maybe something you just abide by and we move on. However, if it's something that's I guess you could say a longer term relationship, such as a husband, I think you can kind of let it sit. Okay, that was a no, and then revisit it in a way that it's like, so why was that, a no? What about it was confronting or not? And then that can reveal maybe other possibilities that would work for the both of you. It's kind of treated like an opener to a conversation, so to speak. And yeah, if you haven't negotiated that they don't have choices, then yeah, it is a conversation. So I hope that helps. Let's see. There's some good ones in here. All right. Here we go. What does female-led relationship mean? A relationship is all about sharing equal responsibilities, isn't it? A relationship, I believe, is about understanding or trying to understand the dynamic and the needs of the persons in front of you, and seeing whether you can meet in a way that's nourishing for you both. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have an equal share of each and every responsibility. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody always doesn't have a say, always has a say. I don't think that you can really black and white anything, especially when it comes to the individual nuance of different people. And so, yeah. Can the male do a regular job? In a female-led relationship, what is a regular job? But if you mean the job that they were doing before the female-led relationship, then unless it's negotiated otherwise, I really don't see why not. If a job is fulfilling to somebody and it supports them and the people who they want to support, then I really don't see why that is something that's part of the conversation. However, if you negotiate a relationship to a point where you are literally dictating the daily actions and the trajectory of the people that you are having a relationship with, then I can see how that's a conversation to have. But maybe there's a common theme here where you have to understand that there's great flexibility in the terms that we touch on, and there's great diversity in the people and the relationships that they have. And so there is no kind of fixed thing. For me, do I allow the people, or do I let the people who I have a relationship with continue their day jobs Yes, often I have things to say about their day jobs so that their day jobs are maybe more nourishing for maybe themselves and the world, and how they can kind of change their jobs to suit that ideal that is close to my heart. But aside from this, I haven't told anybody to quit anything yet. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I am in the first stages of a female-led relationship with my girlfriend. How do I move it to a more stricter stage? Yeah. So there's a part of that that says to me, well, that's not you being led anymore, right? However, there's also a part of that that says to me that your needs are not necessarily being met. And that is something that will be fulfilling to you in the long term, right? That everybody's needs are being met. And so I think you're just in the first stages. It's a conversation. Talk, people, talk to each other. How do I move it to a more stricter stage? I guess you could say, you could introduce like just ideas of, so I really enjoy, well, what does stricter mean to you? Stricter to me means protocol, so protocol around the way that they are in a space, protocol, the way that they are to speak to me, things like this. So if it's protocol to you, maybe you can just ask the person that you're with, are you interested in protocol? Like, what does that mean to you? And to me, it's this, and I would be interested to see how that would work for us. Talk, people. Talk to each other. Just because there is the implied leader, it doesn't mean that you have lost your voice, unless that's negotiated. Yeah. Let's see. Does it take my masculinity away in other aspects of life? So what does masculinity mean to you? Wish I could ask these questions back sometimes. But does it take my masculinity? Let's just make it much broader. Does it take anything away from the other aspects of my life? Does being in a female-led relationship take anything away from other aspects of my life? It depends on the relationship. Would it take away these elements of your personality that make you feel masculine? That's really hard for me to say because I don't know what that means to you. But does it take away aspects of my personality if I enter a female-led relationship? It would really depend on the relationship that you're in. In the relationships that I'm in, does it take away from their personality? I like to believe that I shift personalities a bit into a way that is, like I said, like with the jobs, that's better maybe suited to how I like to move in the world and how I think that will be more beneficial for them and how they move in the world as well. So I think that in a female-led relationship, there's a lot of potential for change, whether that's positive or negative. That's going to be very dependent on the relationship that you're in. And maybe another thing that's coming out is that it's not, female-led relationship is not the answer, to everything. It's, at the end of the day, a relationship is going to benefit, doesn't matter female-led or not, from communication and understanding people's needs. And that's going to be the common theme, whether you're defining it as female-led relationship or not. And so communication is key, understanding your needs is key, and if you want things taken away, saying so is important. If you feel that things are being taken away and you don't want to go there, that's important to say something as well. And be aware that if you sign up for a completely, like, the extreme level of it, if you sign a contract and it says that you are relinquishing all of your say, this happens. However, remember that you will not be able to necessarily have these kinds of conversations unless there's a clause inside that contract, which I have as well. So these are things to think about when you start to advance, I guess, into maybe more extreme versions of what a female-led relationship does look like. I found this interesting. I mean, it was not very well put, but it says it appears that women don't have the confidence otherwise they'll put a step forward in relationships. And I mean, it was not a sentence that I can particularly completely clearly understand. However, the meaning to that, I think what they are trying to say is that if women felt confident to put their step forward, maybe there wouldn't be the term female-led relationship. And so despite the fact that I can't necessarily read this sentence, I find it interesting, my interpretation of it. My interpretation of it is that if women felt more confident to take the lead, there wouldn't be this concept of a female-led relationship. And that's an interesting question. That's an interesting statement, because I believe that it is true to a certain extent. I mean, there's a lot of things about BDSM and about female-led relationships, about the concept of even naming that tells you a lot about the society that we live in and the limitations of the construct that we operate in. And in a lot of scenarios, the woman, the female in the relationship is not necessarily, given that power. And so therefore people start to create this like subsect and start to name it and start to fetishize it, because it is actually unusual in a sense. It is not necessarily accepted in a sense. And it has improved, of course. However, it hasn't maybe necessarily improved to the state where this is not worth naming. So maybe that's what you're trying to say, Marshall. Maybe it's not, but that's what I took from it. And thank you for that opportunity to say that, because I think that is an interesting point to think about. Let's see. This is a new question. What do you find are the benefits and negatives, if any, of a female-led relationship for you and or the relationship? What are the benefits for me? The benefits for me are that it suits my personality quite well. I feel more comfortable, to go to the last statement, to exist as my current personality, to ask and to direct the way that I naturally am inclined towards. So it's a benefit in that it validates my personality in a world that doesn't necessarily do so. And negatives for me, if any. I guess the negative is kind of correlated to that. So for a long time, until I found the BDSM community and understood that there was a concept of femdom and that there were people who actually celebrated this concept, then I really struggled in the world. I learned how to kind of roll back on what I wanted to say, on my needs, and not assert myself, because I could see that it was a big conflict in the general population. They didn't necessarily want to hear what me as a woman wanted to direct the situation as, or to have an opinion as. And so I think that was probably a negative. And I know that's kind of prior to FLR, but I think that was a negative for my personality growing up in an average world before I discovered that the possibilities are much larger than your everyday. But for the relationship in and of itself, I think it's very much on an individual basis. It suits my personality to a T, that it's like, okay, so in this relationship, I'm the negotiated leader. It suits me very well. What are the negatives to that? I think the negatives that come into play are because of the individual in front of me and that conflict with who I am. I think that is when I find that it's a potential negative. But it just tells you that there's an incompatibility. However, before I got to this stage and how I practice my relationships, there were probably more negatives because I didn't necessarily understand how I operate and how I want the person in front of me to operate. And when you're not so clear on those things, I think the ability for things to come up that are not easy to confront or to communicate or just to cut because it's maybe not incompatible, then I think there's more potential for it to feel like there's a lot of negatives in it. So it's basically having the skills of having a functioning relationship, right? Thank you for that question. Let's see. This is interesting. Is the guy or girl, whoever is in the relationship with the female who's choosing to lead, if they are more independent, are they more independent or dependent? So it would, again, depend on the person. How I like to run my relationships is that they are independent. I do not like to feel that they are dependent on me. That's not how I like to feel it. I like to feel like I am needed and good for their lives, but I do not want to feel like somebody's leaning on me all the time. I like them to be very strong, capable individuals who have their own sphere of interests and direction, and I like to be able to steer that. That's the way that I like to do things. Other people like it different ways. Look at all the questions coming in. Thank you. Now, can we generalize that all men who are in female-led relationships are introverts, as in they stay in home and do household chores? Definitely not. You can definitely not generalize that. All of mine are terrible at cleaning. So they work and they hire my cleaners. Yeah. Are they introverts? But I think the people that I lean towards are maybe more introverted, because that is more my personality, and what I like to be around. However, if you've been to a play party and you've seen some female-led relationships in action, you will clearly see that there are some people who are very happy with the extroverted parts of their personalities. So no, I don't think that's something that you can generalize at all. Boy slave. Okay. Yeah. Is it necessary to believe in female supremacy in a female-led relationship, or must it just be about the partners? These are great questions. Thank you so much for these questions. No, I do not believe that it's necessary to believe in female supremacy. And this is controversial in a sense within my femdom community, but I also don't necessarily, at this point in time, I don't believe in female supremacy. I believe in maybe my advantages over the people that I'm in a relationship with, and I believe that I, as an individual, am very much more capable and have a better overview of our relationship than the people who I'm currently in a relationship with. However, I don't think that it's necessary to believe in a be-all and end-all when it comes to ideas of what a female and male is. It's just that I choose to lean on this definition because of what I mentioned earlier in terms of not being able to step into that awareness that I can take the lead, that what my personality is craving. Yeah, and maybe I will even drop, the term at some stage. But for now, it's a very useful way to communicate what I'm wanting out of my current relationships. So I don't think it's necessary to believe in female supremacy or otherwise to be in a relationship that is negotiated as female-led. Okay. What else is there? Look at all your questions. So many ways. I don't know whether this has so much to necessarily do with female-led relationships, but but Crispy Chicken says, what is the best way to show interest and sincerity without seeming over-enthusiastic? that a problem or an issue that you've been running into, Crispy Chicken? Interest and sincerity. I think it would be very dependent on who you're showing interest and sincerity towards. Over enthusiastic, same. Um, Maybe pay attention to see if somebody recoils at your interest and sincerity, and then maybe dial it back if you feel that you can and that you are willing to do that. Um, or maybe you need to move on to find somebody who appreciates the over enthusiasm. However, if it's an ongoing issue, then maybe it's an internal thing that you need to measure. How have I done it in the past? Have I come across this? It's mostly people coming towards me right at this stage, and I think it's about saying, I don't want to hear that from you. I don't want to see this from you. I want to see this from you, and this is what means anything to me. That's going to be interesting. So maybe it's about finding out what is really worthwhile for the person you're directing that energy towards, and give them that as opposed to what you think is interest and sincerity. Is that an idea? So that wasn't necessarily about female-led relationships, but I thought it was funny to entertain. So more about 24/7 than it is about female-led relationships, but I accidentally clicked on it, so. Would you like a 24-hour slave to serve you in anything? House, chores, work, chauffeur. So how I currently have my life set up is that I live with a sub, and they have organized everything. So when it comes to cleaners, drivers, etc. So I have that in a sense, but over the years I found that the standards of how I like to be driven, how I like to be, have my home cleaned or anything cleaned, it's maybe too particular for the people who serve me. I have yet to find somebody who can do all those things as nicely as I would like them to be done. And so I get them to pay for it. That's kind of what I have at the moment. That's what I found works for me. However, I guess you could consider the way that I run my relationships in a sense, to you and your question, 24/7. So I do have people in my life in that basis, in that capacity. However, they pay for the service staff because they don't do a good enough job. Yeah. All right. Okay. So if we apply this question to female-led relationships, so when you're in a female-led relationship in society, do you act normal, or dominant with the partner? What's normal? I am who I am. I mean, I definitely scale back on some things. I have a little rule that I like, where the people who serve me don't get to sit on chairs unless they ask, unless I welcome them. And it's just a little thing that I enjoy. I also have a thing where, for example, I like glasses or drinks to be presented to me in a certain way. However, when I'm in public, I don't necessarily enforce those things. So if I'm at a restaurant, they're sitting. I do have a protocol around sitting. I like them to sit on my right, and at an angle. However, I don't make them sit on the ground. I've adjusted my protocol for the public, because it is also about understanding what is going to be appropriate in that social context, the social contract, right? So I still have my protocol, but I've adjusted it to abide by the social contract. Yeah, and my personality is my personality. So whether you want to call that dominant or not. What should I start with in the beginning of female-led relationships as a male? So if you're going to be the party that's being led, what should you start with? You start with asking them what they want. Actually, no. Let's go one step before that. You start with understanding what you need. And maybe you will discover more about that as you progress. But I guess that's probably something that you need to have at the forefront of your mind, and then ask them what they want. Mm. All right, let's do a couple more, shall we? Hmm. This is an interesting one. So I'm assuming that you mean in a female led relationship, I just feel used. Me and my goddess have discussed it, but she still struggles. Any advice? So it sounds like you're struggling because you feel used. What is she struggling about? So I don't know what she's struggling about because you didn't mention it. But I'll talk about how it might be in a case where you feel used. So if you're feeling used in a female led relationship, and it's not something that you want to feel, because some people like to feel that, then you need to, you say that you've discussed it. What have you discussed? Like how to change that, how to make you not feel that. Do you even want a female led relationship? I think you need to, yeah, another common theme. You need to look and to see what you want. Maybe you don't even want that. Or what does it look like to you? Maybe do some research on what female led relationships could look like, or what relationships could look like in general. And understand that these things are fluid and these things change and these things shift and they're very different and they can be very different. And so, yeah, maybe do some work and figure out what you want and bring that to the table. is my thought on that. Yeah. I'm gonna pause there and say that it will depend on the different configurations that you have. However, female led doesn't necessarily mean that you absolve all responsibility. You know, female led in my case, in the way that I define it, it means that I set a structure. And the structure is in best case to be either followed or to be aspired to, you know, and I want to see that happening. And you have a responsibility to abide by that or to try to aspire to the structure that I'm setting. You are still an individual that has a responsibility to move through the world. In my case, some people negotiate differently, but I'm just giving you a range, right? And that's where my range is at. And so, yeah, you need to maybe potentially be more developed individually to be able to answer what you need, and therefore bring that to the table and to be able to have a more successful relationship. And you cannot just assume that somebody who is interested in a female relationship is just going to be everything. Remember, they can always drop you also if you're not compatible, and you should do the same. You know, you should always be aware that that is a possibility, that incompatibility happens like any relationship, and that an out maybe is necessary sometimes if it's incompatible to the point of being chronically negative for you. Yeah. So, let's see. This is sweet. Maybe I'll end on this one. How does it feel? How does a female-led relationship feel for me? A female-led relationship for me feels very satisfying because it is a choice of mine that I've been able to fulfill, and it is a choice of mine that sits well with the personality that I am. And so it feels really satisfying. It gives me a sense of contentment. It gives me a little space in the world that I can call my own. And I'm always open to that shifting, because I do believe that people bring out different things in each other. And I do believe that the potential for these definitions can be fluid. However, right now I'm very satisfied, and I'm very glad that I found the BDSM community, and that I found people trying different configurations and people interested in following different configurations, because it inspires me to understand the bigger picture, or to try to see how that bigger picture could apply and how it just exists. It feels really nice. It gives me more of a sense of the world. That's how it feels. So thank you everybody for your questions. If people have any more questions, I would like you to write it in. Do you see the little question button down here with the little boxes? You need to click in there and to ask me the questions, because I can't scroll through and find them all. I might do just one more, since we have 2 more minutes left. Thank you everybody for joining me. It's been lovely doing my monthly Q&As with you. Let's see. All right, I think I might. Oh, there's a couple of good ones. All right. All right. Do I prefer 24/7 relationships? Actually, no, I think I kind of answered that one already, right? So the way that I like my life is I prefer female-led relationships. And my personality is a constant. Some people would say that it looks 24/7. So I'm going to go with currently, it looks like, yeah. Let's see. Where was the other one? This one. I like this one. Who is the one that has the economic power? Again, very different every relationship that you're going to be in. Me personally, I like to have the economic power. So for the ones that are closest to me, I own the majority of their assets. I have access to their assets. That's my interest. However, it is entirely dependent on what the person leading wants. Yeah? So what have we learned from this time? There have been some themes. Let's go over the themes before I jump out of here. So some of the themes were just because it's female-led doesn't mean that you have lost responsibility for your own life, unless that is something that you have negotiated. And in the early stages of a relationship, I think it's generally safer to maintain that awareness that you are still responsible for yourself, at the very least, at the early stages. And part of that is understanding what you need, what you are feeling that you need and that you want out of a relationship. So whether that's you want to be told where to sit, you want to be told when to go to the bathroom, you want to be told you have no more cash, it's all mine. You need to understand for you where those barriers lie. And then you can negotiate effectively and find somebody effectively that's going to potentially meet your needs, and you'll feel more fulfilled as a result. So I think it's important to understand where you lie on the spectrum of what a female-led relationship can look like. And then you'll be able to negotiate, and then you'll be able to find a space that's going to find yourself feeling more fulfilled. What was another theme? It's not all about chastity and orgasms. And often the way that I use it is because I want you to focus on something else. Whether that's who you are, whether that's what I need you to do. So if you want to sexualize everything, that's your thing, but it isn't necessarily always about that. What were the other themes that we found? I think maybe that was kind of like the major check boxes that I saw. So thank you so much. I always really enjoy your questions, and I'll do another Q&A later in the month, in July, since they are monthly, and try to think of some themes for me. This theme came as a result of you, so I wonder what the next theme will be. I look forward to attacking your questions then as well. It's all very useful and enlightening for me as well to go through these thoughts, so thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody over in America and that section of the world, and have a good day, everyone in my section of the world.